Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. King of Iowa. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this act may be used to enforce Executive Order 13166, August 16, 2000, 65 Federal Register 50121.
Pursuant to the order of the House today, the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment addresses the Executive Order 13,166. That was an executive order that was issued in August of 2000 that directed our federal agencies to provide foreign language services to anyone who might seek to engage with American government. And when I say American government, I do mean, Mr. Chairman, not just the federal government, also local government. The order directs federal fund recipients, meaning local government, to pay for the enormous cost of providing translation and interpreter services from their own funds. There's no federal reimbursement for this executive order. Many of us support English as the official language. We understand that there are billions that are spent in an effort to facilitate access to government to people who do not have the language skills, but we also understand it's impossible to meet all of those demands. And as we watch the proliferation in this government, I would look at recently Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano released a memorandum detailing a DHS language access plan, which expands this Executive Order 13,166. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, this amendment simply says that no funds available under this Act may be utilized to enforce Executive Order 13,166, and I would yield to the chairman of the subcommittee from Alabama.
Yes, I rise in support of the gentleman's amendment from Iowa, and Luke, we think this is a good idea.
I reclaim my time, and I would then reserve the balance.
The gentleman from Iowa reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Price, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in opposition.
This is an amendment that it seems very clear would actually hamper DHS operations and make us less safe. Every component of DHS has to communicate effectively in their daily operations in order to accomplish the mission of the department. How can ICE enforce our immigration laws without being able to communicate meaningfully with foreign-born persons with limited English proficiency? This is a critical executive order. It was a top priority of the Bush administration. There was a memorandum issued during the Bush administration to the heads of all federal agencies that helped facilitate the development of limited English proficiency plans. To elaborate on this further, I'd like to yield to Ms. Chu, leading member of the Judiciary Committee.
Recognized.
This amendment. If this amendment passed, it would have a negative effect on many immigrants, many of whom work hard and play by the rules and are here legally, but may not have the ability to speak English well. If this amendment passed, innocent people could be harmed. Foreign-born naturalized citizens would be at risk of erroneous detention and deportation by ICE. Not only that, detainees with serious, possibly life-threatening medical needs would be placed in great peril due to the inability to make medical requests and communicate effectively with medical service providers. If this amendment passed, lives could be lost because DHS and FEMA would have difficulty issuing danger warnings and evacuation instructions, as well as other critical notices in other languages during times of national emergency or catastrophe. If this amendment passed, it would be harder for people to become citizens. That is because DHS would be prevented from providing foreign language assistance to the elderly and disabled immigrants and refugees seeking to naturalize and become U.S. citizens. We want immigrants to be fully assimilated in American society. This amendment would stop this process and, in fact, potentially cause great harm to many who do not deserve it. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from North Carolina yields back his time. The gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just quickly in closing, I would point out that we got along fine without this executive order up until the year 2000, and we'll get along fine without this executive order after the year 2012. The assimilation component of this doesn't take place if you facilitate foreign language speaking within government. 87% of Americans support this policy, the policy of English as the official language. This is a component of it. There's nothing that prevents justice from utilizing language, or health or emergency services from utilizing multiple languages to take care of the people. So I'd urge its adoption, and I'd yield back, and thank the chairman, and I'd yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Iowa yields back. The question,
Mr. Chairman.
what purpose does the gentleman from Washington?
I move to strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I yield to my good friend from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Dix, and I will be brief. I just want to point out that the executive order itself indicates that only actions that would not be unduly burdensome should be engaged in. And the true scope of this amendment is really quite broad and adverse to the enforcement of the law. If you are ICE and you have people in custody, those people in custody may not be speaking English, and you may need to be able to communicate them in a language other than English. The broad scope of this amendment could interfere with that. I would like to note also, as to the FEMA issue that my colleague from California referred to. We think of DHS as immigration. My colleague from Iowa has mentioned that frequently in our committee. But the Department of Homeland Security is very broad. This could be the Coast Guard dealing with sailors in the Caribbean Sea, either people they believe are out to do mischief, or people who are in distress, who may not speak English. This could be storm warnings, as has been mentioned. There are parts of Florida where Spanish is spoken. Certainly in Puerto Rico, Spanish is spoken, and hurricanes come. You want to alert the entire population in a way that they can understand that danger is on its way. So I think this repeal of this presidential order, which goes back almost 12 years, through many administrations, is ill-advised. It will make the country less safe, and certainly it is an amendment that we should not support. And with that, I would thank the gentleman, and I would yield back to Mr. Dix.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve his time.
I yield back the balance.
And the gentleman from Washington yields back. The gentleman from Iowa has already yielded back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa. Those in favor say aye. And those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that I ask for the ayes and nays.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa will be postponed.